Hi Glasgow. I'm from a group called Expose Scotland, and we campaign to keep children safe in Scotland. We raise awareness for people that are not aware that there's a Scottish child abuse inquiry going on. For anybody that's interested, there's information and stuff here. We also give out a newspaper which puts all the members of police and all the politicians that have been charged with sexual offences against children. They're in a little newspaper here. But the reason why we're here today is we're going to start a strong campaign for nobody that's aware, and we're going to take the opportunity well there's a global conference going on here, and they're calling it Climate Change, and it's a global conference. Well, we're here to raise awareness that this climate change is caused by child traffickers worldwide. The reason why we have climate change in the first place is we have global world leaders and elites running about in aeroplanes and cruise ships and submarines, and they're trafficking children and human beings across the world. That's the reason why we have climate change. Also, if anyone's not aware, we went into lockdown last year. For nobody that's aware, there's something else happening globally. There's a global sex education programme that came in last year as well as COVID. So for anyone that's not aware, when we went into lockdown last year, there was also another thing happening globally, and that was the sexualisation of your children. There was a sex education programme that came into your schools to start teaching your children sex education from 3 years old. The parents have had no parental consent. There's no parental opt-out. In Wales, there's a massive child protection issue in Scotland, guys, and you all need to wake up. If any of you have got children, nieces and nephews, grandchildren, then you need to listen to what I'm got to say today. There's a massive child protection issue in Scotland and nobody's listening, and it's through the Scottish Government putting a sex education programme into your schools. This sex education programme will mean that you will lose your parental rights over your children. Your children are going to start being sexualised from 3 years old, and they're going to have sexual rights from 5 years old, and it's called RSHP. It's Relationship and Sexual Health and Parenthood. It's a new sex education programme that the global paedophiles have globally put into your schools, and they're going to start sexualising your children and removing your parental rights. Everybody doesn't think this is real. It's happening in Scotland. Nicola Sturgeon and the Scottish Government have already stated that your child can change their gender from 5 years old. So your child can go into school right now, legally, and change their gender and their name while in school, and they don't need to tell you. You have no parental consent and no parental opt-out. Now they're bringing a global sex education programme into your school, and you're all going to lose rights over your children, because your children are going to get sexual rights from 5 years old. This is in Scotland. This is happening right now. This global sex education programme was created 10 years ago. All the countries around the world sat round a meeting and accepted this global sex education. The countries that didn't accept it got threatened with a foreign aid to get pulled. Now they accepted that, and 10 years later, last year, there were so many countries around the world hadn't implemented this sex education programme, and we went into lockdown. And while we were in lockdown, the education systems were changed in your schools, and they started sexualising children. They are going to be teaching them sex education from 3 years old. They're going to get sexual rights from 5 years old. When your child has sexual rights, you no longer have parental rights, because if you try and oppose this, then you will have social work saying that you are refusing your child its sexual rights. People need to stand up and fight back against this. It's the parents' duty to sexualise your children, and it's the parents' job to say when your child should be sexualised, not the schools, not the teachers. This is a massive safeguarding issue and a massive child protection issue in Scotland, because these people are not qualified to be teaching this stuff to children. They have no safeguarding in place, and they have no safeguarding for what's going to happen. So let's say they tell your children about sex at 5 years old. Then your child wants to experiment, and your child goes home and teaches its 2-year-old and 1-year-old brother and sister. This is where there's a safeguarding issue, guys. Right, this sex education programme was created by paedophile policies and global paedophiles. We went into lockdown to implement this in schools, and every school in Scotland has accepted it. So your child is going to be getting sex education whether you want to, whether it's against your culture, your religion, your beliefs. They don't care. They're taking your parental rights away from you by forcing this into schools. They didn't ask for your consent. They didn't make you aware it was happening, and they feel that they don't have to. But like I said, once this is implemented, it's sinister. Once your child has sexual rights, that also allows your school to treat your child for sexually transmitted diseases without the parents' knowledge and without the parents' consent. It also allows your children to start receiving hormone blockers for 7 years old through the schools, because your child has sexual rights and they have rights to their gender as well. So if your child decides they want to change gender, they don't need your consent. They can do it through the schools, through this sex education programme. They can start prescribing your children drugs and hormone blockers and changing your wee boy into a wee girl without your consent, without your knowledge, and no parental opt-out. This is a global sex education programme, guys, and it's serious. It's in Scotland from the 1st of September, and it's to sexualise your children. And if you look into it, it's part of the Global 2030 agenda, and that's sexualisation of all children. But like I said, once your children have sexual rights for 5 years old, this will be happening next year, you no longer have parental rights over your child. Your parental rights are gone because your child now has sexual rights over yours. And if you try and oppose that, they will send social work and remove your children. Now, not only have you got social work coming from that angle, I've also got a teaching document here as well, where they have went on a 3-month training course, all teachers, because we've been in a pandemic, remember? They still haven't mentioned the global sex education programme that they shut all our countries down for. It wasn't COVID, it was the sexualisation of your children, and it's not happening in your schools. Your children have sexual rights, which means you've lost your parental rights, which means you have no more rights to your children ever again, and your children does not have the right to stay innocent, because they're going to steal your child's innocence. They're going to remove all children's innocence across the world, and you're never going to get that back once their child's innocent. So here comes the sex education programme, right? I'm going to read you a bit of this booklet. You can all take these information leaflets, you can Google everything I'm saying, and you can find out it's true. You can check the laws and the legislations that they're going to use to remove your rights, your parental rights, and you're going to have no rights over your children to 5 years old as of next year. And if you refuse and you disagree with them, well, they're going to come and take your children from you. This is a massive child protection issue in Scotland, and we've got massive safeguarding issues. So the future of sex education in Scotland, with your new RSHP, sex education for children from 3 years old, courtesy of the Scottish Government, and its agenda to remove parental rights and give your child sexual rights over the parents. So in 2020, the Scottish Government legislated to take away parental rights, choice and say over primary and comprehensive sex education. This sex education programme also will give your children from 10 and 11 a link to Pornhub through your schools. So this sex education will also introduce your children to porn, because it's going to be giving them a link to Pornhub through your schools. This is in your education system now. You need to stop this. The Scottish Government are stealing parental rights, sexualising children, and not asking for parental consent. It's a safeguarding issue, and it's a massive child protection issue. So your refusal to partake in these lessons will result in the parent breaching their child's sexual rights. This is when you have social services at your door saying that you're refusing your child's sexual rights at 5 years old. Sexual rights allow the state to administer medication to your child without consent, including hormone blockers and the right to transition gender from infant. The Scottish Government have already made it legal to change gender for 5 years old in primary school. Your child already has the right to go into school and change their name and gender without your consent in your schools in Scotland. With these sexual rights, your child will then be allowed hormone blockers without your parental consent. Lesson content encourages children to explore their body and sexual stimulation. Sexual consent, porn, prostitution, anal sex, facial ejaculation. What has any of that got to do with our sex and reproductive system? Children don't need to know this. Schools are pilot. There was 242 schools piloted this scheme in England last year, and they encouraged 5-year-olds to masturbate. They encouraged the children to experiment with their brothers and sisters. They encouraged, they said it was normal to touch yourself, it was normal to do it in your bedroom. But this is your children at 5 years old, your school are telling to masturbate, when to masturbate, how to masturbate, and when they can and can't do it. That's a fucking stranger. That's a stranger that is teaching your children about sex. When are people going to wake up and realise that all your children are going to be removed? Scotland has started teaching this, and it's called RSHP, Relationship, Sexual Health and Parenthood. The frameworks fail to safeguard, leaving children vulnerable to abuse. Wales have already lost their parental rights over this sex education programme. Wales are already this month in court because they now have lost the parental rights of their children, sexualisation from 5 years old. They do not have any rights to their children in Wales. The children at 5 have sexual rights over their parental rights through this sex education programme that is now in schools in Scotland. So I'm going to just give you a wee bit of some facts and figures of what's took place since this global sex education programme's hit the world. The waiting list for transgender intervention in 4-year-olds, 4 years old transgender intervention has increased by 80%. 80 to 90% of children change their mind by adulthood. The governments are seriously destroying the minds of your children. They're confusing our children, and now they're about to teach them sex education from 3 years old when we've just come out of a pandemic. Our children are already confused enough. In Scotland, we need to start safeguarding our children against the paedophiles, and the paedophiles, sadly, are our politicians. We're education ministers, we're MPs, we're judges, we're lawyers, we're legal system, and anybody in power right now, because these are the people that are bringing this sex education programme to your children. And like I said, if you don't pay attention next year, you'll have no parental rights. You'll have lost your parental rights over your children. Your children will be sexualised and you'll have no say. And if you try and safeguard your child then, it'll be too late because they've got laws in place. They will send social services into your house to remove your children because you will be failing to give your children their sexual rights. So these sexual rights are from 5 years old. Right guys, that was all I wanted to raise awareness. I want to put it out there. If anybody's been listening and they want to know more about the global sex education programme that happened last year when we all went into lockdown and get forced into your schools, then there's information and booklets here. I also have a newspaper here that raises awareness about the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry that's currently taking place, and there's cases of dangerous paedophile rings and members of Police Scotland that have been charged with being paedophiles in there too. So guys, thanks for listening, and we will be back here every Sunday, and we'll be campaigning about this global sex education programme. We'll be going to everywhere we can soon, and we're not going to shut up. They went a step too far when they start trying to come into your schools and sexualise your children. It's not on, and people need to stand up and start waking up, or else you won't have any parental rights. Your children will be removed next year if you oppose this. So guys, I'm going to go for now if anybody wants anything to say.